going to monitor. Oh, there we go. Deb is going to monitor our chat. So if you have a question, because we have quite a few attendees, which is amazing, turning our mics on and off and having that reciprocal conversation is maybe a little bit difficult with so many people. So if you can use the chat to ask any questions throughout the presentation, that would be great. And we'll let you know if that's something that we're going to cover later, or maybe it's something we should be addressing right when you have the question. Okay, and then we'll have some time at the end as well to answer questions if you have any, or any thoughts that you want to share. All right, let's get into it. The Hamilton Community Cat Network, we have been together for a few years now. I'm the chair of our group. We meet once monthly, and we have Hamilton Animal Services as part of our group, the Hamilton Burlington SPCA. We have two veterinary clinics that are kind of in the background, but there for support, and of course, volunteers. And our main goal is to reduce the community cat population here in Hamilton. But this networking that we're doing today, having like-minded people learning together is really an important part of our mission. Education and supporting each other during this very difficult work is also what we want, what our goals are for our network. So thank you for that, and making that a reality for us by joining us today. Deb is on our network, and Jennifer might be here as well, who's also from our network. So,
and Margaret.
And Margaret, thank you. Yes. Okay, Kayomi, do you want to talk about Etobicoke Humane?
Yeah, definitely. So we've been around since 1987. We're fully independent. We're not really affiliated with other organizations. We don't get any government funding. It's all through donations. Everybody's a volunteer, so nobody's paid for the work that we do. And basically, our main focus is on taking in cats that other organizations might not have the resources to work with, like cats that are undersocialized and need a lot of time to become social friendly cats, and cats that maybe are more the reactive behavioral issue type cats that other people don't really want to work with or don't have the ability to work with. And then we take in some animals that don't have any issues. They're just lovely animals that don't need much help. But basically our focus is on the cats and dogs too that have some behavioral issues or medical issues that need some extra help. So yeah, I'm very excited to be connecting with people in Hamilton now as well, because I've just been very contained to Etobicoke Humane Society. So it's really nice to reach out to a wider network and get to know what other organizations are doing.
Thank you.
So our goals for this workshop are basically to review humane practices for reducing the community cat population. I know there's a lot of cats out your way, so lots needs to be done to help reduce that population for sure. Also to learn about feral versus stray community cats, to learn how to determine levels of socialization of a community cat, and to learn some helpful tips for socialization of semi-feral community cats and kittens that just need some help to get to a point where they can be more adoptable and they're, friendly, lovely cats. They just kind of need that extra push to get to that point, and they need the time to get used to people, as well as to just share experiences with each other, learn from each other, because like Beth said at the beginning, you guys all have your own levels of experience and your own background. So we want to be able to learn from you guys as well.
All right, great. So we're going to start with just 10 facts to know about community cats. And this is kind of Hamilton centric, but really this is all over Ontario. We have community cats all over Ontario. And this list has been adapted from the website above the cat site. So number one, Hamilton has 30 to 50,000 community cats. Many are feral and others are stray. And we'll talk about the difference between those two next. And community cats are in every city, like I said. So we like that umbrella term of community cats, that are cats that are not owned and are living on our streets. It's like it's really lends to, this is a community issue. We need to deal with this as a community. So stray cats. So there's a difference between stray and feral. Some people will say, oh, this feral cat's showing up at my house. but really there is a difference between the terminology. So stray community cats, they're not feral. They are pet cats that have found themselves homeless due to being lost or abandoned. And they may present as feral. You might have some history of knowing a cat that was terrified out on the street and comes inside and is super friendly. So they're in that survival mode sometimes when they're outside, and they may present as feral. Feral community cats are domestic cats that were born and raised with little or no contact with people. So they're very fearful of humans. Just a little bit of a comparison here. So stray cats may approach people. They may approach houses and try to get into someone's house. Feral cats will not do this. They are afraid and do not want to come close to people. Stray cats may be vocal. They might meow or answer your voice, and feral cats not so much. But you might find that as cats are becoming socialized, even when they're outside, that they will start to do things like meow at you or purr. Stray cats will be visible primarily during the daytime. They're not afraid to be out in the day, whereas feral cats are nocturnal, and they'll be occasionally be out in the day. It depends on when their feeding time is, right? Because food is probably number one for them. So they might be seen in the day, but most likely at night. A stray cat, they don't know how to really care for themselves on the street, so they might be dirty, disheveled, or thin, whereas a feral cat will be cleaner and well kept, and unless, of course, they are injured or ill or don't have a food source. Number 4, unowned cats often live in colonies forming around food sources. So the cat on the left, his name's Tucker. He came from a colony in Stony Creek, and he was a friendly community cat. He was one of the friendliest of the colony, so he was taken out and found a home. There were many, many cats there because there was a food source there, and the cats were just multiplying and multiplying until we stepped in and fixed them all, which was great. And the cat on the left is BW. He's a cat from that's my porch there. And he just showed up because, yes, there was food out for another street cat, and he found it. And he ended up living here for a few years. So we at the Hamilton Community Cat Network believe that the only humane way of controlling the community cat population is through TNVR. And the main reason for this is the sheer number of cats there are. We need that population down. So TNVR is really the best way to get that population of community cats down. So TNR stands for humanely trap, spay, neuter, ear tip, and microchip, vaccinate the cat, and then return the cat to the original territory. Of course, we only want to return cats that are going to a territory that have a food source, someone feeding them and monitoring them, as well as providing shelter for those cats. Number 6, community cats, they can be happy outside. Those 2 cats on the right there, they are community cats not too far from my house, actually, and they love their life outside. They are definitely feral cats, and they're fed twice a day, and they live in this man's yard, and he cares for them outside. They have shelter, warm shelter for the winter, and they are happy cats, so they can be happy outside. The SPCA, it's really their program in Hamilton that have been making all the difference. They are the ones that set up the clinics for the TNR cats, and they work with colony caregivers. So in Hamilton, you have to be registered as a colony caregiver in order to use their TNVR clinics. And if you want more information about that, we can absolutely provide that for you. Or you can go to the Hamilton Burlington SPCA website or our Hamilton Community Cat Network website and find that information. This is important to know. So public health is definitely, they're part of our group, and cats are considered a high risk for rabies. Rabies is real, it's in Ontario, and we need to be sure that those who are trapping or taking care of community cats are taking care of themselves, right? So they're considered wildlife because they're interacting with wildlife out on the street. So TNVR is amazing because they actually get vaccinated, and therefore they're not going to get rabies. At least they're protected for that year or however long that vaccine stays in their body. To date, since 2015, we've had 215 raccoons, 112 skunks, 1 fox, and 2 cats. These are ones that they know of, that have been tested. So there are other animals, of course, that have had rabies in Hamilton. So this is just a caution, and we always want to put the health of those who are caring for the cats first. We want to take those precautions when we're working with cats. We want to make sure they're vaccinated for sure. Number 9, this is a big one. Unsexed females can have 15 plus kittens a year when born outside, and many of them die. 50 to 75% will not make it. Of course, those that do make it are extremely robust, and they will continue that cycle of kittens and kittens and kittens every single year. And then, of course, it will grow. And that's why fixing the cats has to be our number 1 priority. For sure. In the picture, that's a sweet little 1-year-old girl with her 5 boys. She was a mother to 5 boys. Very cute. And they're all in homes now. This was a couple years ago. She was not a feral cat. And then number 10, finally, some feral community cats can be tamed. So we call this socializing them to humans, and but it does take a lot of time and effort, and that's what we're here to talk about today. You can see the little ferally kitties on the left. Kittens tend to be easier to socialize. You know, they're always one, my friend says they're one wet food bowl away from purring, from being your best friend, right? When they look like that. Whereas adults tend to, they have all that experience behind them, and they're going to take a little bit more effort to, I call, say, turn around to be friendly. So this boy on the right, he's Rudy. He came from the same colony as Tucker that I showed you that was sitting in the straw. And he is living with his rescuer, his trapper, now inside, and his socialized. But it did take time for him, for sure. Okay, Kayomi.
So, as you guys know, I'm sure cats are very sensitive creatures. They're very affected by any changes, whether those are big or small changes. And so, of course, when a cat is first being trapped, they're not going to be showing their true personality. You're kind of going to be seeing the rougher side of their personality, maybe because they're feeling stressed out. They're probably going to be, hissing and just kind of not presenting as their true selves, basically. So it's really hard to assess their personality and assess their level of socialization when they're in a trap. Studies show that even friendly cats can present as not very friendly, even after being, out a little bit, settling into their new space, if you're bringing them into your home or wherever. And it can take them some time to relax and kind of decompress from the experiences they've just been through. It's a pretty big change to be going from outside to being inside or to being in a trap. So they're not going to present as their true selves for a little while. And then over time, they start to settle in, and you can really see, how social is this cat? What does this cat need? What do I need to do to help them become more social? Or, are they cats that maybe would be better to be going back outside because they're, far, far away from becoming more socialized cats? But it can be a bit misleading, the behavior you're seeing from them when they're in a trap, for sure, because it's not a very comfortable situation for them to be in. So it's going to take them some time to show their true personalities.
So when you're determining if a cat is feral, it's important to start with just understanding that there is a spectrum of socialization. So the least socialized cat was extremely frightened of humans and unaccustomed to being close to humans at all. And then you've got the most socialized cat that loves you and wants to be on your lap and all over and climbing up for hugs and everything like that. So very comfortable with humans. So cats are going to fit anywhere along that socialization line. And just getting up a graphic here, 1 sec. There we go. So it's important to remember that the level of socialization of a cat is not equal to their adaptability or their level of aggression, which is interesting. And let me explain that a little bit for you. So in my experience, some cats that are super aggressive cats are coming across, their fear is being shown in a way that is aggressive. Those cats sometimes can turn around and become friendly within a week. Okay, so it's just, every cat's different, and you'll find that some cats will show their fear by hiding, and we'll talk more about the way that cats react to humans in a little bit. Or sometimes cats will lunge at you and hiss and snarl, and this is just their way of trying to get you to leave them alone because they're scared. But that doesn't mean they're not adoptable, and that doesn't mean that they cannot be socialized. They're just scared. So let's remember that as we move forward. So cat body language is really important when you are socializing a cat. And a lot of the information that's taken today is from the ASPCA Pro website. And I'm just going to take us there just to show you the website quickly. So this website is fantastic. They have done a feline spectrum assessment. And what they did was a study, and they looked at different cats at different levels of socialization, and they researched and they found out some behaviors that the cats exhibit when they're more socialized versus feral. And on the bottom here, there is that cat feral webinar. It's a really great webinar, and I definitely recommend it. What we have done here is taken a little snapshot of some of the things that they have said. But if you're interested, you can always head to the ASPCA Pro and check that out. So part of their presentation, just wait for this to show up. So they had one and done behaviors. So these are behaviors for socialized cats. So if a cat chirped, if a cat was rubbing on the cage, or making biscuits, we like to call it. If the cat was wanting to touch or play or at the front of the cage. And finally, if their tail was up in the air, these were called one and done behaviors. So if they exhibited any of these behaviors, they were considered socialized cats. Then they had less obvious signs of socialized cats. So if these cats presented 4 or more of these behaviors, such as yawning, grooming, shaking, sniffing your hand when you put it out for the cat, rolling around, I call that doing a rolly, approaching toward the front of the cage, reaching toward the human, standing or moving around the cage. If they exhibited 4 or more of those, they were also considered socialized. So you can look for these signs when you have a cat. And even as they're becoming socialized, you can say, oh, that cat's yawning in front of me now. When I first watched their webinar, I did not realize that yawning was a sign of being comfortable, right? I just thought maybe they were tired. So it's good to know these things because you can look for these very small changes in the cats as you're socializing them and see them as progress. All right. So also we talked to the people at Toronto Humane Society. They've developed 2 of their own scales that they use on a number 0 to 5 scale here. And the first one is response to petting assessment. So from 0 to 5, it shows just the gradual change and how the cat would respond to petting. So 0 would be approaching you, actively interacting with you, tail up, so totally socialized. Number 1, staying where they are, but showing signs of interaction. So they're rolling around, they're enjoying the pets, but they are not approaching you. Number 2, staying where they are, but showing mild signs of enjoyment. So you'll see a cat like closing their eyes, lifting their chin, enjoying that petting a little bit, but not coming toward at all, staying still. Number 3, staying where they are, but tolerating petting. So like, okay, you can touch me, but I'm a little bit nervous here. Their body feels hard and tense. Number 4, stay where they are, but showing signs of not wanting to be touched. So if a cat's flinching or flattening their ears or looking scared, their body is tense. And number 5, fleeing your attempts to touch. So they're running away from you. They do not want to be touched at all. So that's their response to petting assessment. And this can be available to anybody who's interested in it for sure. And their second assessment is called the participation in play. So how a cat reacts when you try to play with them. So 0 would be enthusiastically playing or moving around. Number 1 is they're playing, but they're tentatively playing and moving around. Number 2, enthusiastically playing from a stationary position. They're like staying back, but they're playing with you. Tentatively playing is number 3, but staying still, watching you, but does not engage. I've seen it. I have cats that do that. They're watching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but they're not quite ready to join in yet. And then number 5, there's no interest in play at all, or your attempts to play scares them. Okay, they don't know why you're waving that wand in their face. So over time, you'll see the cats start to participate and play more often or more progressively over time.
So
Okay.
each cat is very individual. They all have their own personalities, their own experiences, their own backgrounds. So it's not going to be the same for every cat that you're working with. I've worked with so many different cats that were very under-socialized and shy when they first came to the Etobicoke Humane Society, and they all progress in different ways. They all have very different personalities. So it's important to just kind of understand how to read their body language and read their cues in order to properly socialize them. So you kind of have to get to know each one on an individual level. They're all going to become socialized at different rates. So you kind of have to limit your own expectation for progress. Most of the time, these cats aren't going to become, comfortable with affection and super social within the first week of having them. Most of the time, it's going to take a few weeks, maybe even sometimes months, depending on the cat and their level of comfort with you and the amount of time that you can dedicate to working with them as well. And some cats will, change completely overnight. We've had cats that I've worked with before where one day they're, very defensive and hissing and swatting and you can't approach them. And then the next day they've kind of calmed down, they've settled into their space a little bit more, and you realize they're actually fairly friendly cats. But most of the time with these types of cats, it's kind of just baby steps towards getting them to be fully socialized. So it's going to take a long time usually, and you see little signs of improvement, like they're comfortable doing, certain new things in front of you that wouldn't be a big deal with socialized cats, but with, a shy, under socialized cat, it is a big deal. Like Beth was saying before about the yawning, and if you see little things like that to show that they're relaxing, that's really great, which we're going to talk about more later on. And some cats are going to, regress and then make more progress. They're going to take some steps back before they go forward. It's going to just depend on the cat and the experiences they have with you, and the time you can put into socializing with them. It's really a fine line between respecting their boundaries and challenging their boundaries. So it can be kind of hard if you're someone who's maybe not as experienced to kind of find where that line is. But essentially, you want to challenge them, and you kind of have to sometimes make them a little bit uncomfortable in order to get them to the next step in their progress and to get them socialized. So, if they are a little bit nervous of you, you don't want to just leave them alone, or you don't want to just sit in their space and say, oh, well, I'll just, let you come to me, because they probably won't come to you if they're a cat that truly needs the socialization. They're not going to just feel comfortable coming out and approaching you for affection. You kind of have to teach them that affection is something that's nice. And then once they kind of start to learn that, then down the road, they'll start to come out to approach you and do all these other, fantastic things that show that they're gaining confidence. But it really is, you have to just find that balance between, not pushing them too far so that they stop trusting you, but also continuing to challenge them, which sometimes means that you're going to be stressing them out a little bit, making them a little bit uncomfortable. But in the end, that helps kind of build up their tolerance and make them more comfortable with you in the long run. So you kind of just have to keep trying at it. So, for example, if you're dealing with a cat and you're trying to get them used to affection, and you're trying to use the back scratcher on them and they're hissing at the back scratcher, and we're going to talk more about the back scratcher later on. But if they're hissing at it and they're really uncomfortable with it, some people will say, oh, okay, they really don't like the back scratcher, I'm just going to stop trying. But if you stop trying, then they're never going to get over their fear of it. They're never going to become comfortable with it. And then it's going to be really hard to start to approach them with your hands and to just get them used to affection in general. And of course, if the end goal is to get them placed in a forever home, it helps if they are comfortable with things like receiving affection, because most people want to be able to do that with their cat. So your safety is also really important. So, if needed, you can use things like gloves or other protective gear when socializing with these cats to kind of limit your risk of getting scratched or bitten. I tend to find with a lot of these cats that they make the motions as if they're going to do these things, but often don't make a ton of contact with you because they're kind of nervous about making contact with you. And so if you're using things like gloves, it's, that's really going to help protect you. And the back scratcher as well, because the back scratcher provides distance between you and the cat. And so if they're nervous and they're, hissing and swatting and trying to bite, they'll do it to the back scratcher, not to your hand. So it's a really great tool for keeping you safe as well. So these two pictures here are actually my cat, Abigail. So she was a cat that was brought into the Etobicoke Humane Society. I believe she was actually originally from somewhere in Hamilton. And she was a very nervous cat. She had had kittens, and she was in another municipal shelter before coming to us. And she was very nervous, and they weren't able to do much socialization with her there. So we took her in, And she was just, a very defensive cat. You can see in the first picture, her ears are flattened, her pupils are kind of dilated. She's in that kind of crouched position. Her mouth is kind of open, so she was probably hissing or had just finished hissing at the person taking her picture. And it was very hard to approach her and to get close to her because she would just, go right for your hand to swat you. Even if you're just trying to bring her food bowl close to her, she really didn't like that. She didn't want us to get near her at all. And eventually she was in a space where she had this tall cat tree and she would just be on the top of the cat tree all the time. So you'd have to like stand on a chair in order to see her and interact with her. So it was very difficult. And then at the beginning of COVID, all of the cats that were in the shelter at the Etobicoke Humane Society were moved into foster homes. And I ended up taking on Abigail and fostered her for quite a few months, and then eventually ended up adopting her because we just grew a really great bond together and I couldn't let her go. And she's now a cat that is a lap cat. She's super affectionate. Yesterday, she probably sat on my lap for like 3 or 4 hours. She's just like glued to me. She's really, really sweet. Still a shy cat at heart, but a very different cat from how she was when she was in the shelter environment and when she had no socialization at all. And you can see the difference in the body language here for sure. The second picture, she's a lot more confident looking and relaxed looking. She, her ears are neutral, her pupils aren't dilated. In the first picture, she kind of looks a little bit mean and people might be intimidated by that expression. But she, really had a very sweet personality underneath once she got the socialization happening. So we want to talk a little bit about body language. So there's definitely, as you can see in those last two pictures, a difference in body language between a cat that's feeling pretty relaxed and more confident and, they're comfortable being around people versus a cat that's feeling nervous and shy and, isn't really sure about people. So some things that that will show you that a cat is more relaxed around you is if their ears are in a more neutral position. They're kind of, they're not flattened, they're not rotated, they're just kind of up and normal. If their paws are kind of tucked under them and they're just kind of, in that low position and very comfortable. If they're facing towards you, because, a lot of cats, when they're feeling really nervous, will kind of bury themselves in the corner and just kind of face away from you to just pretend that you don't exist, basically. If they're making eye contact with you and slow blinking at you, that's a really, good sign that they're a relaxed cat. And these are all things that you'll start to see as an undersocialized cat becomes more socialized. If they're doing things like sleeping in front of you, eating in front of you, lying on their side with their belly exposed, leaning into petting, whether that's, from a back scratcher or from your hand, because some cats might be fairly relaxed, but not ready with your hands yet, versus some will just be good with your hands right away. And some need time to get used to the back scratcher and to affection at all. If their legs are outstretched or if they're stretching in front of you. And then of course, if they're purring, that's a really great sign that they're relaxed. If they're doing things like kneading, all those sorts of things are really signs that the cat is feeling relaxed around you. And then in terms of more fearful body language, so you can definitely tell with these pictures on the screen that, these are cats that are feeling pretty nervous. I really love the two pictures of the orange cat. They're super cute. So, you can see them often, they're in that kind of cowering, crouched position. They're keeping themselves flatter to the ground. They're backing away from you or running away from you. Sometimes if it's a cat that's, got a lot of energy, I find they'll kind of try to run across the room and jump on all these different areas to get away from you. Or if they're in more of a kennel type cage space, they might be trying to climb the side of the cage to get away from you. They might be ignoring toys or they're nervous of them. A lot of them have never seen toys before or interacted with them before, so they can be kind of scary things at first. If their ears are flattened, if they're hissing or growling, of course, if their pupils are dilated, you can definitely see with the orange guy there, his pupils are very dilated in that bottom picture, you can really see it. Charging, and I find sometimes like they'll do charging and lunging, but a lot of times, at least with cats that I've had experience with, they kind of do it to look intimidating and to kind of scare you, but often they won't actually, like, they're not coming at you and they're not going to like climb up and attack you or anything like that. They're kind of just, they make themselves look scary and they make themselves sound scary, but they're not really wanting to make a lot of contact with you if they don't have to. And often they're going to be more trying to back away from you while doing these scary looking and sounding things at the same time. Sometimes you might see that their fur on their back is kind of raised, like I was mentioning, climbing the crate, making themselves invisible. So, keeping their eyes closed, not making eye contact with you, hiding in the corner, facing away from you. A lot of times they're not going to allow petting either from your hand or from another thing like the back scratcher. They're going to be very stiff. And then often they're going to be swatting, which might be with or without claws. It's going to depend. It helps if they have kind of clipped nails so that if they do swat you, you're not going to actually get scratched really. So here are some pictures of some cats that I've worked with at EHS. So all cats that became socialized in the end, but it took them some time to get there. So you can see with the black and white cat Max, he has the kind of flattened ears, the dilated pupils. He's in that crouched position. With a brown tabby at the top, Alex, again, she's kind of crouching a little bit. Her pupils are fairly large, and her ears are not quite in a neutral, natural position. And then you can see in the bottom picture, the one orange cat is just facing towards the wall, pretending that humans don't exist. So that's very common body language with these cats. They just look like they're not very comfortable, and they just kind of want to try to hide themselves away and avoid you.
So some important,
yeah.
Okay,
no, I was gonna say, I thought you were gonna do that one, yeah.
Yes, I muted myself. Okay, some important notes about scared cats. They're exhibiting the behavior because they're afraid. Okay, so you'll hear someone say, "Oh, she's mean," or "Oh, that's an aggressive cat," but it's really not that they're mean, it's that they're scared. And I find that when you change that thought in your mind that there's mean cats and nice cats versus a scared cat and not a scared that isn't a cat that isn't afraid, then that shift in your thinking can kind of give you some empathy for the cat, really make you feel for that cat that is afraid. So they aren't going to behave this way forever. That's also really important to know, but time is the key ingredient here for the behavior to decrease. They typically aren't going to hurt you, of course, unless you are putting them in a position where they feel they have to. And Kayomi has alluded to that. So cornering them, picking them up when they're not ready, petting them by hand too soon, that will threaten them, and they might, so that's when you might put yourself in danger. So we want to avoid that by always, like Kayomi said, walking that line and not pushing them too far too long or in the beginning. If you're maintaining some distance from them by using a tool, then it's very unlikely you're going to get hurt. Okay, so this is a video that Kayomi prepared for preparing a cat in your house, a shy cat. So we're going to watch this now. Good morning. There we go.
Can you increase the volume, Beth? We can't hear anything.
I think you have to click on the top. There's a thing that says share audio with screen share.
Okay, 1 second. I'm going to share sound. Gotcha. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, we'll try again.
Good group effort.
Yay.
So in this video, I'm going to go over how to set up a safe room for your shy foster cat. So it's important whenever you're fostering a shy cat that you start them off in a designated safe room. This could be a bedroom, a bathroom, an office space. It just has to be a room with a door that can be kept closed so that your foster cat is contained to one smaller space and doesn't have access to your entire home right away. This will make the transition to your home easier on them, and it will also make it easier for you to interact with them. So the most important thing to do when setting up a foster room is to scan the room to see if there are any hiding spots the cat could get into that would make it hard for you to interact with them. For example, underneath something like a bed or a couch, or behind something like a dresser or a bookcase. You'll want to block off these spaces before you bring the cat into your home. And this is very important because you don't want to give them the opportunity to hide in these hard to reach spots. And if you bring them home before you've blocked off these areas, they're going to immediately go to those spots, and it'll be hard for you to see how they're doing and to interact with them. So to block off these spaces, you can stuff some blankets or towels or pillows into them, but make sure when you're doing this that you pack the spots all the way to the back, because otherwise the cat will be able to push their way past the initial barrier and access the spot anyway. So you just want to make it completely inaccessible to them by really packing it full with blankets and towels and all that sort of stuff. You also want to be really diligent and block off even the smallest spots that you see in your room. You might think that the gap is too small for the cat to fit into, but they are very good at squeezing themselves into tiny, tiny spots that you wouldn't think they'd be able to fit into. So be on the safe side and block it off anyway, so you just don't have to worry about it at all.
Now, once you've blocked off all the hard to reach hiding spots, the next thing you're going to do is think about alternative hiding spots you can provide the cat with so that they can still feel secure and they still have a nice spot to sit, but you can interact with them really easily. So EHS will provide you with something like a cat cubby or a cat tree or a bed, and these are those kind of areas where the cat can feel secure, but you can still see how they're doing and access them. So when you're placing these things around the room, place them further into the room, maybe in the corner where it can feel a bit more secure and private. Just make sure not to place these things right next to the door, because the cat's going to feel nervous sitting there if they can hear all the noises coming from outside of their room. If you can, you'll want to provide the cat with some higher spaces to sit and some lower spaces, because some cats prefer one over the other and others like both, so it's nice to give them options if you can. So a higher spot could be just a bed on a table, a lower spot could be a cat cubby in the corner of the room on the floor, and you want to just provide them with as many comfortable spots around the room as you can so they can pick and choose where they feel most comfortable. Now, the other things that you might have in the safe room are a scratching pad or a scratching post. Again, you're going to want to place these further away from the door so the cat actually feels comfortable using them. You're also going to have a litter box in the room, and again, place this further from the door so the cat feels okay about going into the litter box. They're not scared off when they hear noises outside. And then you'll also want to have some food and water bowls in the room for them. So make sure that the food and water bowls are far away from the litter box, because cats don't like when these two things are close together. And for the first little while that you have the cat, you want to have the food and water bowls close to where they're hiding so that they don't have to venture very far to get their food and water, and you know that they will actually feel comfortable enough to eat and drink because the food and water is right there by them. You also want to evaluate the window situation in your room. Take a look at your windows, make sure that they're fully closed, they're properly secured, and if you're thinking eventually down the road that you might want to open the windows, you'll want to make sure that the screens you have in there are really sturdy and secure. If you have old, worn out, wobbly screens, or if you have no screens at all, you don't want to be opening the windows at all, ever. If you do have these kind of old, wobbly screens, the cat could easily break through them or push them out of the window and escape the room if they're feeling nervous. Definitely you don't want to ever be opening the window until the cat is more comfortable with you and more comfortable in the environment. So those are really the basics of setting up your safe room for a shy cat. Really the most important thing is to block off any potential spots you could see the cat getting into. Even if you think they're too small, block them off anyway. If you have to remove some furniture from the room, do that. It's better than having to try to get the cat out of that spot later, because that can feel pretty impossible. So just do a really, really good job of blocking off all these hiding spots.
Thank you, Kayomi. All right.
So in this video, I'm going
Wants to play again. Okay, so this, sometimes you can, if you don't have a space in a room or you have a couple cats you're socializing, you can use a dog crate instead. So this is a video that I created showing a cat that is being socialized in a dog crate. Hello, this is Jasper, and Jasper is currently set up with an extra large dog crate covered with a sheet so he feels safe. We are currently working on socializing Jasper. He had some dental work recently, and he had a line cut because he was very matted. Jasper is still quite scared, but he's improved because he is no longer at the back of the dog crate. Now, when they are in an enclosed space like this, it's important to make sure that the litter is scooped multiple times a day, because their food, of course, is very close, and we know that cats are very sensitive creatures, and it wouldn't be nice for anybody to eat beside their bathroom, would it? There you go. So he's got some toys. We do give him catnip. He has his hard food that's watered down right now because of his dental work, and when we come and sit at eye level with him, we give him his wet food, we give him some scratches on the head to get him used to being pet, and lots of treats too, which he loves to eat now in front of us, which is also a great sign. So if you don't have a room, or you don't feel like your room is suitable for socializing, a dog crate is another option for short-term socializing. Of course, we wouldn't want to have a cat
confined to this small of an area for a very extended period of time. This is just a short-term solution to get Jasper used to human beings.
Okay.
So when your foster cat first arrives into your space, it's really important that you give them some time to just settle in to their environment, decompress, and get to know the space. They kind of need some time to just, explore on their own a little bit. If you're going to be in the room with them, they're going to be too nervous to do that. So you want to give them a lot of time on their own. It's good to spend a few brief periods in the room with them, just so that they can get to know you a little bit, they can observe you, but don't worry about actually approaching them and interacting with them. Just kind of sit in their space, talk to them, slow blink at them, just so that you can kind of get familiar with each other, but don't worry too much about the socialization aspect yet. And really spending time sitting with them is still part of socialization, even though you're not doing any hands-on interaction. After the initial few days of them, once they've kind of had some time to decompress and settle in, then you can slowly build up the amount of time that you spend with them. So it's going to kind of depend on, how much time you have and what the cat is willing to kind of tolerate from you. But what I often have done with my cats that I've fostered in the past is I'll kind of spend like 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 chunks of time with them throughout the day. And maybe at first you're spending like 15-minute chunks of time with them, so that you're not with them for too long and overwhelming them. And then over time, as they're becoming more comfortable with you, you can start sitting with them for like half an hour or an hour if you have the time. And spending more time with them, the more you can do in one period, the more progress they're going to make usually. Because if you're spending like 5 minutes and then leaving the room, they're not going to get to know you very well. It's going to take them longer to make progress with you. They're going to have their on and off days, of course, or even their on and off periods throughout the day. So some cats, just some days they're not really in the mood for interaction, or they're really tired for whatever reason, and it's going to be harder for you to interact with them. So sometimes that's going to dictate how much time you can spend with them and how much time you can work on interacting with them. And I find that some cats will have preferences for certain kinds of day. I find that a lot of them kind of get a little bit more courageous at nighttime. Stuff is a little quieter, it's darker, they feel more protected sometimes. So if you're finding that you're trying to sit with them in the mornings and they really want nothing to do with you, then maybe try to focus more time with them in the evenings when they're more receptive to you. And then, of course, after you spent some time with them, they're going to need some time to decompress. So it's good to give them long chunks of periods throughout the day where you're not interacting with them, because they need time to just kind of relax and sleep and kind of regroup after having a stressful interaction with you. Even if it wasn't that stressful, it still is kind of stressful for them just because they're so shy.
Great. So you want your cat, your foster cat, to associate you with good stuff. So we want positive interactions with our foster cats. So provide treats in your presence. You want to give them wet food, something that they really love to eat with you. What I like to do is just leave a bowl of hard food for the cat to graze on whenever they're hungry. So they know there's a food source there, but give them that really good stuff only when you're there. So when you're feeding that wet food, you put the bowl down and you don't leave, you wait. And sometimes they'll just look at it and they'll look at you and they'll look at it, and then they want to eat that food, but they don't quite feel ready. Eventually they will come forward and eat that food, especially if it's really close to their nose. And sometimes putting it on the scratcher helps too. Using tuna or salmon, pureed chicken, that's baby food, cats love that. Sometimes those, they're like tubes with the treats inside. That's a good thing to give them. They love that as well. Providing them catnip and keeping the litter box clean is very important. Trying to engage in play, but of course backing off if they're afraid of that. You always want to leave on a high note. That's really important. So the cat is trying to get you to leave by hissing, scratching, all those behaviors that are showing fear, but they're trying just to get you to leave them alone, basically. So if you were to leave when they hiss or whatever that behavior is, then they're going to think, oh, okay, it worked. And they're going to be more likely to do it again. So when the cat hisses or the cat gets upset, you just sit and you wait. When the cat is calm again, then you can leave the room. Okay, you want them to associate you with that calmness and with good things. Really important, not that I think anyone here would ever hurt a cat, but you don't ever want to punish a cat for behaving defensively. So if a cat comes at you, with, charging at you, you don't want to, yell or, do something that will make the cat more fearful of you, because that's not going to help in the long run anyways for that cat. So being very calm, taking a deep breath. And because cats are such sensitive creatures, they do feed off of your energy. So taking a breath, being calm, speaking in that quiet, calm voice is going to make a huge difference for your cat, even if it's behaving in a way that is a little bit scary. Okay.
So something that people often forget about is the importance of playing. So playing is a really great way to connect with your foster cat. It can also help to build confidence and encourages them to come out of hiding. So it can kind of just help them get used to being out in the open in their environment. So a lot of times with these types of cats, they're going to try to stay in their own little corner or in their little cubby space or whatever you have for them where they can kind of hide. And they won't be coming out that much. They're not taking the time to explore the room and get familiar with most of the space. They kind of just stick to one spot a lot of the time. So playing is a really great way to try to get them comfortable being outside of that zone and being out in the open a little bit more. So a lot of them are going to be uninterested at first, or they might even be a little nervous of toys. Like I was kind of mentioning earlier, a lot of them have never seen toys before. They don't really know what to make of them, especially if you have toys that are like have little bells on them and stuff like that. That can be kind of scary because it's making some noise. So it tends to be best to use toys that are kind of silent so that it's a little less scary for them. And I find that most of them do eventually become playful, even if they show zero interest at first. So it's really good to keep trying, even if they're not interested when you first bring out the toys. It might take you some time to build up to that. But if they're nervous, then keep it brief so that you're not freaking them out for too long. But just keep trying to see. I know with my cat Abigail, she, I would try when I first had her as a foster. I was trying, every day for a couple of weeks, and she would just kind of look at me, look at the toy, but she wasn't really following the toy with her eyes, and she wasn't really coming out to play at all. She didn't seem very interested, but I kept trying. And then finally, after about 2 weeks, one time when I was trying, I was like, okay, she's not going to go for it. She's just not interested in playing. But all of a sudden, she pounced on the toy. She dragged it across the room. And since then, she's been super playful. So just because they're not playful at first doesn't mean they're never going to be playful. So it's good to try out some different toys because some cats will just have certain preferences. So a lot of them really like feather wands, laser pointers, catnip toys. Some of them really like if you're, throwing a bouncy ball for them. I know my cat really kind of likes to play soccer with me. I bat it back to her. She bats it back to me. So just try different things to see if they seem to prefer something in particular. And then also try different movements. So, slow movements versus fast movements, dragging it on the ground versus waving it around in the air. Again, some cats are going to have preferences for one over the other. Especially I find with Shire cats, sometimes they prefer if you're using slower movements and kind of just dragging it slowly in front of them because it's a little less scary than if you're waving it around really quickly in the air. And then it's also good to leave out toys that they can play with by themselves because a lot of times they're going to learn to play alone before they start to actually engage with you. So just leave out, little toy balls or catnip toys. And I would just say whatever you're leaving out, just make sure it doesn't have like feathers or ribbons that they could easily rip off and ingest because you don't want to have an emergency surgery on your hands or anything like that. So leave out toys that they can't really rip apart. And yeah, like I was mentioning, if they're scared, you use the slow movements and gradually build up their exposure. You can even just leave the toys near them so they can get used to the toys. So maybe for the first little bit, if they seem nervous when you're first trying, don't worry too much about actually moving the toys around. Just have it out near them so they're seeing it, they're getting used to it. The more comfortable they are with just seeing the toys, the more comfortable they're going to become when you actually start moving the toys around in front of them.
Okay, so approaching your foster cat, you want to enter the room slowly. Sometimes I notice that the cats are very scared of the door, so you don't want to come in with the door swinging. So talking to the cat as you, in a very soft voice, open the door slowly. You want to sit and speak with your foster cat in a calm voice. You might need to start by sitting away from the cat at first, and then waiting until their demeanor just calms down a little bit, and then you can shift your body closer. You might not be able to get close enough to touch the foster cat at first. Of course, if the cat's in a crate, that's a little bit different because they can't go anywhere. But if the cat is in a room, they might hide, they might run from you. And so you just want to give them their space if they're running and then slowly get closer. And they will let you get closer over time. Slow blinks, calm voice will help your foster cat know that they're safe and get comfortable with you in the space. Even just sitting in the room and reading or watching TV, or even sometimes I sleep in my foster rooms, which will help them to feel comfortable around me because of course I'm not threatening when I'm sleeping.
And something else that I mentioned too about slow blinking is that was definitely something that I didn't really realize was something that was helpful at first. I didn't really believe it. People were like, oh, slow blink at the cats. And I was like, really? What's that going to accomplish? But they do actually communicate to each other using slow blinks. And so when we do it towards them, it communicates that we're, friendly, we're not a threat. They don't have to be so nervous in front of us. And then that really helps them to calm down. So often, if you see a cat has really dilated pupils and they're seeming really nervous, if you start to slow blink at them, they'll start to relax, they'll start to slow blink back at you. And so it's just a really great way to communicate with them in a way that they understand. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is starting to approach the cat for affection, starting to get them used to being touched. So I have a little back scratcher here to kind of show you if you guys have never used one before. So at EHS, we use these all the time. They're super helpful. You can get them on like Amazon, and I think sometimes they have them at like Canadian Tire and places like that. So they're just very helpful tools for getting cats used to affection. You can extend them really far so they can provide lots of distance between you and the cat, which is really helpful. So it's good when you're approaching them that you approach them at their level, not from above. So often I find with these cats, they're kind of sitting on the floor. So if you can, sit on the floor with them so that you're not towering over them, that's going to feel very intimidating for them. And it's going to be hard to get your hand or the back scratcher close to them because they're just so nervous of the fact that you're kind of above them. It can be good sometimes to pet the cat while they're eating because food is usually a positive thing. So if they're receiving some affection while they're eating, that can help them to develop that positive association between affection and you, and gets them used to associating food and affection, which is a really positive thing. Sometimes cats are a little nervous about eating in front of people. So if you're dealing with a cat that's really nervous about eating in front of you, maybe you want to hold off on petting them while they're eating until they're more comfortable eating in front of you in general. But I find sometimes they can be more receptive when they're eating because they're kind of focused on the food. And so they're less worried about what's going on around them, I find. So it can be very helpful.
Have you found, Kaomi, that sometimes they don't even notice you're petting them while they're eating?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. They're just so food focused. Like I find, especially if it's a cat that's kind of been living outside for a while, they're like, oh my gosh, someone's feeding me and it's like right in front of me. So this is awesome. Like, I don't care about what you're doing to me. I have food in front of me, right? So it can be very helpful for that. So yeah, the back scratcher is definitely your friend. They're going to kind of see it as an extension of your hand, but it's less intimidating because you don't have to be quite as close to them to use it versus if you're trying to pet them by hand, you have to be quite close to them to do that. The back scratcher, you can be a bit of a distance from them so they feel a bit more comfortable with that. If you put some food at the end of the back scratcher in the claw part of the back scratcher, it might entice them to lick it. And again, that helps to develop that positive association. I find even if they're not really willing to eat from it in front of you, you can always leave it out for them, later on, and maybe they'll eat from it when you're not in the room. And even if they're just smelling it and seeing it, that helps to, get them to associate it with something positive. So it's good when you're petting them, and this goes for whether you're petting them by hand or with a back scratcher, that you're sticking mostly at the beginning, at least to their chin, their cheeks, maybe their forehead and their ears a little bit. But generally, they're not super comfortable having their bodies touched, especially at the beginning. Gradually, you can kind of build up to doing that. I tend to find that with a lot of cats I've worked with, they get comfortable with the head first, and then they learn to love affection. And then when they start to actually stand up and approach for affection a little bit, that's when you can start transitioning to petting their back a little bit. But I find often when they're kind of in a position where they're lying down, they tend not to like having their back touched as much.
Okay, so this is a video of, maybe you can tell us about this cat.
Yes, so this cat, his name was Dasher. We had him come in from a hoarding situation. So these cats were all living in a garage. There were about 25 of them living there together. And so even though they technically had like owners, they didn't really interact with the cats very much. So the cats were very nervous of people, very defensive. So this video just kind of shows him getting used to receiving affection from the back scratcher. So you can see he's clearly enjoying it. He's got his eyes closed. He's stretching out his chin. He's happy about the interaction. He's not trying to get away. He's not hissing. He's not behaving defensively at all. And it can take them some time to get to that point for sure. It's not something they're going to be comfortable with right away usually.
Absolutely. Awesome.
So many of them are going to be nervous of the back scratcher at first. First of all, just because they don't really know what it's for. They might be worried that, it's going to do something to hurt them. Their first instinct is to believe that we're going to do something to harm them, basically. So whenever something is coming towards them that's coming from us, whether it's a back scratcher or a hand, that can seem kind of threatening and intimidating at first. So sometimes they will hiss at it, they'll swat it, they'll bite it, but it's really important that you don't give up. The back scratcher is typically really the gateway to petting them by hand. And that's really, at least for me, that's kind of my main goal usually when working with these types of cats, is to get them comfortable with affection, first from the back scratcher, and then eventually starting to transition to hands. So it's really important to kind of keep working at it. And, if you find that they're really not receptive to it at first, that doesn't mean that you should just stop trying. Like, oh, they just hate the back scratcher, that's it, I should never try again. You have to kind of keep working at it to build up their tolerance to it and get them to a point where they can kind of first tolerate it, and then eventually they'll learn to enjoy it. But it can take time for that to happen. It can take weeks, it can take months. It's going to depend on the specific cat. It's not going to be the same for each one. So there are some things that you can do to help them get a little bit more comfortable with the back scratcher. So, it's really important that you keep working at it a little bit every day. The only way to kind of get them past their fears of it is to kind of keep showing the back scratcher to them every day, trying to approach them with it every day. And, you can help that by, putting some food on it, like I was mentioning before. And like I said, even if they won't eat from it in front of you, you can leave it for them when you leave the room, and they might eat from it then. It's good to also just leave out the back scratcher near them, even when you're not using it. The more that they see it, the less scary it will become, especially because if they're seeing it in a stationary position, it looks less intimidating than when it's coming towards them. So if they're really nervous of it when it's coming towards them, then get them used to it in a stationary position first, and then that will make it easier for you to start actually approaching them with it. And then another thing too, I find, is if they're a little nervous just at the beginning of the interaction, give them a couple minutes, leave out the back scratcher for a couple minutes before you start approaching them with it, and then try after having a little period for them just to get used to it being near them. And then if they begin, hissing, swatting, biting the back scratcher while being touched, then just kind of back off for a second, wait for them to relax, and then continue, because you want to keep the interaction positive. If they're, behaving defensively in the middle of the interaction, that means that they're not happy about something, maybe even interacting with them for a little too long, or you touch them in a sensitive spot. So just back off. And then usually if you give them just a moment to kind of calm down, you can then continue the interaction. Or if you think that they've really kind of reached their limit and you want to just come back later on in the day or in the next day, then again, just stay with them until they have fully relaxed, and then leave the room so that you're ending on a more positive note. And that just helps keep everything positive. It keeps them happier with you, basically.
So just some more comments about touch. As the cat gets more comfortable with you, the beautiful thing about those scratches is you can shorten it over time. So just gradually you shorten the scratcher so that your hand gets closer to the cat. And sometimes you can be using the scratcher and just sneak your hand in there and just get a little bit of the chin. And then they might look at you and think, oh, that was your hand. But that's good. That's a good progression, right? So again, it's about that just keeping an eye on the cat, watching their reaction, and then reacting to that. So relax them with a back scratcher first before approaching with your hand, especially when you're going in between the two and they're starting to learn to like pets from your hand. Start with a scratcher, they're liking that, then go in with your hand. Approach with a closed fist when you're going toward the cat, or one finger extended. If your hand is fully open, it's kind of more threatening for the cat. You want to move slowly and let them sniff you before touching. That's always a good thing. And the sniffing is a good sign. If they're sniffing your hand, that's a great thing. You want to avoid hovering over their head and touching the back of their body, as Kayomi already mentioned. Some cats are very fearful, and you'll see them like ducking and looking, where is your hand, not knowing what you're about to do. So starting low is really good. And then as you get to know your cat, and as that cat's comfortable with you, if they like scratches on the head, then that's different, right? You get to know that cat. If they become uncomfortable while you're touching them, pause and wait, and then continue, just like with the scratcher. And if they're trying to get away from you, let them go, try again later. Like we said earlier, you might not be able to touch them right away. It's going to take time, and you might just get a little graze in, and then the next time it's a little bit longer. They are such small incremental steps sometimes with these cats. And then so take every little step forward as a win, okay, and as success, because most of the time it's very, very tiny steps, and it's going to take a while to get to that point where they're just rolling all over for your affection with your hands.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention too that I mean, with my cat, it took her. She really loved the back scratcher. Pretty much, I mean, when she was in the shelter environment, she wasn't a huge fan of it. But definitely when I had her as a foster cat, she was, she really started to enjoy it fairly early on. But it took me 3 months before I could pet her with my hands at all. It was very hard for me to get my hands close to her. She was just very, very nervous. And so she would, be coming towards me and, getting a little closer to my hand. And then she'd kind of realize what she was doing. She's like, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to be that close to your hand. And she'd back away from me, or she'd give me a little swat or a hiss. And then finally, after working with her every day, multiple times a day for 3 months, she started to accept my hand a little bit more. But I could only really pet her very briefly, and then she would usually swap me or back away from me, and then I'd have to go back to using the back scratcher. So usually it's going to be a lot of kind of stopping and starting, where you kind of try to interact with them a little bit with your hand. They're okay with it for a second. You have to go back to the back scratcher because they become uncomfortable. You can try with your hand again, and you kind of have to just kind of go between the two, basically. And then finally, with my cat, after about 4 months, I was just able to pet her with my hand. Didn't need the back scratcher at all anymore. But it can take them time to get to that point. And you might experience as well sometimes regression happening where they, for whatever reason, they stop becoming comfortable with your hand, and you have to just go back to the back scratcher for a few days and kind of work back up to using your hand more. So it's a long process to make that transition. Even if they're a cat that really likes the back scratcher, it can take them a long time to warm up to your hands, because it feels different, it looks different, and they kind of sometimes think that we're going to try to grab them when our hands are coming towards them. So even if you're dealing with a cat who loves affection from the back scratcher, don't be surprised if it still takes you a while to work up to using your hands. So some other main things. It's good, like I was kind of touched on earlier, to spend the time that you can with them, and try to spend at least like an hour a day with them. I know sometimes that with your schedules or whatever, it might not always work. You might not be able to dedicate that much time, but I would say just kind of dedicate as much time as you can. If you can do more than an hour, then that's great, as long as you're giving them those periods in between to decompress. But if you're able to just spend time with them, whether that's sitting with them or actually interacting with them with the back scratcher, talking to them, whatever you can, just spending time in their space helps them to get used to you. So like we mentioned before, you can kind of build up to that. If at first they're kind of more nervous of you, you can build up, and gradually you can start spending longer periods with them. And then once they get more used to affection, you can spend a lot more time actually petting them, rather than just sitting there and kind of, being in their space, but not doing a lot of interaction. So like we've said, slow blinking is really great. Speaking in a soft, soothing voice is really great. I find that cats really respond to like positive tones. So my cat, like when she hears me speaking in like a silly, high-pitched voice, like she finds that really positive for whatever reason. And so she'll, come running out to see me when she hears that. Or if she hears me talking to one of my other cats like that, she's like, what's going on? I want to be involved in this. It sounds like something good is happening over here. So they do respond really positively to the way that you're speaking, and they understand your tone of voice as well. It's good to try not to show your teeth a lot. Smiling can be a bit scary for them. You can read to them, play the radio for them so they can hear lots of talking, and they get more used to just the sound of human voices. Sitting in the room without interaction, like I said, like that's still, even though you're not doing anything in terms of actual interaction with them, it still gets them used to you being around them. It still kind of shows them, hey, like I'm in your space, I'm not doing anything to hurt you, you don't have to be nervous of me. And then that makes it easier for them to accept you approaching them later on. Try playing with them with a string. And like we said, if they're seeming afraid, if they're ignoring it, then, do it briefly and then stop, and gradually build up the time that you're doing that. Cat TV videos can be really helpful as well. There are lots of great videos on YouTube of, birds and squirrels and everything like that. And I find that a lot of cats are really intrigued just by the noises of that. And so if you have a cat, especially who's kind of maybe hiding a lot, if you put a video on your phone or your computer or your TV, if they're hearing that, they might actually be brave enough to come out from their hiding spot because they're so interested in the sounds that they're hearing, and they'll come out to look closely at the screen. You can also work on introducing your cat to multiple people over time. So I find often with these cats, they kind of get comfortable with one particular person who spends the most time with them. And then, it's good to introduce them to others so that if they're, moving on from your home eventually, is not quite as much of a shock for them because they have, met a few different people along the way. But it can be hard sometimes for them to become comfortable with other people. If it's safe to do so, and if you have another cat around, then it can be helpful to bring in a friendly cat to kind of show them the ropes and demonstrate that humans aren't so bad, affection is nice. And especially if it's a cat that is used to other cats and really likes other cats, they might just be so interested in that cat that they'll actually come out in front of you a little bit, and they'll be more willing to approach you maybe because they're seeing what this other cat is doing. So I know that's definitely been helpful with my own cat, because she really loves one of my other cats for whatever reason. I don't know what their bond is, why that happened exactly, because he doesn't really care for her that much, but she really likes him. And so he has a very loud purr and a very loud meow. And so if she hears him purring in the other room, she comes running out, and she's suddenly a lot braver because she's like, oh, Max is here. So I'm going to, see what he's up to. And I'll approach people that I wouldn't normally be comfortable approaching because he's doing it. So it can be very helpful for getting that process to go a bit faster. And another thing I wanted to just quickly mention is that it's good to kind of develop a good routine with the cat. So I tend to like to visit them at the kind of the same times throughout every day, so that they kind of get to know when to expect you. They're really creatures of habit. So they'll be a little bit less nervous if they kind of know, oh, generally around these times of day, I can expect this person to come in. And that way it's less startling for them when you do come into their space.
Awesome. I just want to mention too, just to piggyback on what you said, I've had some young cats that are, older kittens, maybe 5, 6 months that I work on socializing. And I find that they particularly, they come out of their shell when you bring another cat in. They are excited to see that cat, and they turn around so much faster, especially cats from large colonies too. They're like, oh, okay, this is a safe place to be. So if you can do that and you feel that it's safe, then that's a great thing to do for sure. Okay, signs of improved socialization. This picture here on your right is of Rockefeller. He was one of those very defensive cats when he first was trapped, and he was almost a released cat because of his behavior. He every time I would reach in with his bowl of food, he would hiss and growl and swat it out of my hands, and then the food would go flying. So he luckily needed dental work, another one that needed dental work. Often community cats have broken teeth and things like that. So he needed to be with me a little bit longer, and I would look at him and say, please, please be friendly. You're so sweet. And eventually, yes, he did turn around. And over time, I noticed he was more relaxed, and his behaviors kind of dwindled. He would hiss at me, but it wouldn't be like that aggressive hiss. It would just be like just a little hiss. So I could tell he wasn't as afraid of me, and his swats were less aggressive as well. So yes, food was still flying, but not as far. They're more comfortable with being touched. So with him, I noticed I was petting him, he was enjoying it around the head, and then he turned his body so he wasn't even looking at me, so that I could get his back, and he enjoyed that. Cats eating in front of you is an improvement. Falling asleep in front of you, sitting up or walking around, that's great. Following a toy with their eyes and then joining in. Being visible, not in their hiding place, maybe moving around the space while you're there. If they come forward, of course. Making eye contact with you is great. You want to be blinking though, as Kayomi said. You don't want to be staring at the cat, because when you think about a predator and a prey, right? The predator stares in such an intent way when they are going to attack. So keeping that facial expression soft is really a great thing to do. When they're grooming themselves, that's helpful, and of course yawning and stretching, that's showing that they're comfortable with you. And Rockefeller is now in a home with a retired widow who loves him so much, and he sleeps on her bed, and he's the sweetest guy ever. So he just needed time, which is what most of these cats need.
Yeah, and what I would say about that too is that there are all these little things that you would look for with a cat who's not very socialized yet, that you really wouldn't care about at all with like a cat that is fully socialized and friendly and confident. Like all those little things that Beth just mentioned. Like you have to take all the little things as like big signs of progress and improvement, and just every little thing that they do that's new is a sign that they're relaxing in front of you. So I like to keep like little notes of the cats that I work with to remind myself of like how they were when I first started interacting with them versus what point they're at now, because you might not realize how much progress they've made, but then you're like, oh, they actually are falling asleep in front of me, and they're slow blinking at me, and they're eating in front of me. So those are all really great things, and you might not have really realized that all those things were happening. So it's good to just keep a close eye on that, and remind yourself that all those little steps forward are really big milestones, even though it might not seem like much. And then this video here is a video of a cat, again, that I was working with at EHS. So she was also from that garage hoarding situation that the other cat, Dasher, was from. So this is Holly, and she was quite a nervous cat as well. So this just shows her learning to accept affection from hands. So she starts to kind of lean into it and relax into it. At first, she was kind of looking at my hand a little suspiciously, but then she realized, oh, actually, you know what? That feels really nice. I'm going to stretch out my chin for you so you can scratch me there more. So that, again, shows that she's, fairly relaxed about the situation. And I would often, I'll wait for the dog to stop barking. I would often kind of pet them a little bit slower than that. Like I kind of knew her, so I was, comfortable enough with her to pet her a little bit faster. But usually with a cat that's just getting used to affection, I would go a little slower, so it's less scary for them, and they're more comfortable with it usually. And then you see she politely tells me, "That's enough. You've been petting me for long enough. I don't want any more."
It's very polite.
Yeah, some of them aren't quite that polite. So she was very polite about it. She wouldn't even use her claws. So some of them can be like that. They'll be very gentle about it and just kind of politely let you know that they've had enough. And in that situation, if you're dealing with a cat who's kind of letting you know whether they're doing it politely or not, and you think, okay, I've pet them for a good, maybe minute or so. And at first, that it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, pretty good if you started off only being able to pet them for like 10 seconds. And gradually you can kind of build up the time you spend petting them, and hopefully they're going to gradually, accept pets from you and from your hand for longer. But if they're telling you that they've kind of had enough, then, back off a little bit and just, stay with them, maybe try playing with them, try feeding them by hand. Hand feeding is a really great way to get them more comfortable with your hand getting closer to them. So if they're not so sure of your hand, then that's something you can definitely try out. And like the tube treats and stuff that's really good can be really helpful for that, because they really smell it and they really know that they like it, and they'll come out maybe a little bit to approach you even for it. And I've dealt with cats in the past where if I tried approaching them with my hand with nothing in my hand, they wouldn't have it. They didn't want me to get closer to them. But as soon as I had a treat in my hand and I was like, look, I have food here, I could get my hand closer to them. Even if I couldn't actually pet them, they would at least allow me to get my hand nearer because they saw that there was something good there, basically.
Yes, and sometimes I would give them the wet food and just place my hand beside the bowl. And then they look at your hand, and then they look, they're looking at your hand, and then they eat. Okay, your hand's there, but I'm safe. So that's a good thing too.
And often I find that like they're not really comfortable eating in front of you unless it's right under their nose. So if they're not comfortable eating from their bowl in front of you, they might actually be comfortable eating from your hand in front of you, because they just can't resist it when it's right under their nose, like you kind of mentioned earlier.
So this is, again, Jasper. I want to show you first the video of him when he first came, his behavior, what he was like. I'm just going to warn you, he does lunge at the camera. So, and I'm not expecting it. So we'll watch that first, and then I'll show you you can see his progression from the pictures. So just be ready to jump, possibly. All right.
Say hi. He's chosen to be in his transfer cage, so I'm okay with that. Oh, jeez. I wasn't ready for that. So, okay, buddy, you're okay.
I have a few videos like that. One time I was taking a video of a cat trying to show how he had improved, and he did not like my phone, and I was bringing my phone closer to him, and he batted it away. So when they're new, especially, or if you don't want to put the phone right in their face. I did learn a valuable lesson there. And a lot of the things that we're talking about is trial and error, right? It's just going to take time to learn what works, and cats are all different too, which adds that other layer of interest, right? Makes it that much more interesting. Okay, here is Jasper a little bit further along in his socialization. This was about the same time as the video I took talking about his crate. So you can see him much more comfortable.
Here I am with Jasper again. Jasper just got up from his bed and moved over to where his toy was. Hi, Jasper. So I've been using a scratcher up until now to scratch him. At first, he was growling and hissing at me and running to the back of the cage when we first came in. Now he's feeling a little bit more relaxed. As you can see, he's sniffing around because he's looking for treats. Jasper, would you like a treat? He is starting to react to that noise even now. I don't think he likes the bright light of my phone, but here you go, buddy. Here you go. You gonna eat it? Yeah? Good boy. This is quite good for Jasper. He's getting more comfortable.
Call this food motivated.
He's leaning in when I scratch his chin, which are all very good signs. Good boy, Jasper.
So my hand was going over top of his head there, but I knew that's something that he liked.
Cute. Oh boy. So the ears go down a little bit when I'm petting him, but he is relaxing. Putting his paws under, which is very good.
You can see he's calm. He's enjoying it.
He'll get there.
And he does get there. So as you can see from the other pictures here, Jasper's in my lap in this one here. He is in my arms, of course, in the corner there, and he almost became aggressively affectionate at the end when I had him. And he would climb up. If I was bent over doing something, he'd jump on my back. He just wanted to be loved, and it just took some time for him to trust. But wow, was he a lovely cat. And he went to Etobicoke Humane Society and found a lovely home. So that was pretty great. He was from Bimbrook area and again, needed dental work. So therefore needed to stay. And I saw that he was doing really well. And over a couple months, he was with me about 2.5 months. And then he was, as I said, turned around and totally friendly at that point. Okay. Oh.
Yeah, it's amazing the difference dental work can make sometimes, because I know I was helping out a foster parent at EHS, and they had a cat that they're dealing with who was a very shy cat. And he was also peeing outside the litter box all the time, and he would just pee in his own bed, and he would just stay sitting in his own bed, and he wouldn't bother to move. And we figured he probably needed some dental work, but it was, we were having trouble getting him an appointment. And finally one day they went into his room and one of his teeth had fallen out. And after that, he stopped peeing in his bed, and he became a lot more calm around them and a lot more affectionate. So it's really amazing what a difference it can make when a cat who's in pain is suddenly not in pain anymore. That can really help as well. Something else I wanted to mention just before I get into this last little part here is about regression. And Beth, maybe you'll have something to add about this as well. But what I wanted to say about that was basically that, regression is something that you will often be dealing with. And basically, it can look like a bunch of different things, but basically the cat is taking a couple steps back from the progress that they had made. And I've definitely dealt with this with my own cat and with lots of cats that I've worked with at EHS. And basically, there are lots of different reasons that can happen. Sometimes they're feeling a little bit unwell all of a sudden, so they're not really wanting to interact with you as much, or maybe they've just been back from a vet appointment and that was kind of stressful for them, or maybe you've moved some furniture around in their room, or you've introduced them to a new animal or a new person, and that kind of makes them feel a little bit more nervous overall. Or maybe you push their boundaries a little bit too far, or you interact with them in a way they didn't like, and so they're feeling a little bit less trusting towards you. But if they do regress, it doesn't mean that they've lost all their progress. Usually, if you kind of go back a couple steps, you can help to rebuild that confidence and get them feeling comfortable with you again, and get them back to the point that they were at before. And often they kind of just need a couple days to readjust and get over whatever freaked them out before. And so, for my I have a couple examples of my own cat. Like she's a lap cat now. She's, loves to sit on my lap all the time. And so a few weeks ago, I was like drinking a glass of water while she was sitting in my lap. And I've done this before, but for some reason, she happened to kind of turn around right as I was drinking from the glass of water. And she got really nervous, and she looked at the glass of water, and her pupils got really big, and she went leaping off my lap and running back into a different room. And for the next couple of days, she was like really jumpy around me. She didn't want to sit in my lap. She didn't want me to pet her by hand. And, I've had her for like a year and a half now. So she knows me. She's used to me. She's very comfortable with me. But something about that interaction made her really uncomfortable. And then eventually, after a couple of days of that, I was able to kind of get a really good chin scratch in. And then she was like, oh, right, it's you. It feels really good when you give me affection. I don't have to be nervous with you anymore. And she got back to her old behavior. But funny little things like that can throw them off. Like something that you wouldn't think would be a big deal can be a big, scary deal for these cats because they're very sensitive. And another example with her is I took her up to my family's cottage back in the summer, and she'd never been there before, and she's hasn't been moved out of my house for a year and a half, and I knew she would be thrown off being in a crate and being in the car and being in a new environment. But I figured that she's very comfortable with me, and so if she would hear my voice and she would see me, and so once we were there, she would probably be fairly comfortable with me because she knows me very well. We have a very good bond. But she was just so scared that she was hiding, and she was hissing at me, and she didn't want me to get my hand close to her. So I had to get out my back scratcher. And as soon as I got that out and I started, petting her with that, she relaxed and she was like, oh yeah, right, it's you. I don't have to be nervous around you. And so she started coming out to me more and behaving more like her normal self. So sometimes you kind of have to go back a step. So often one of those things will be, the cat gets comfortable with receiving affection from your hand, but then for some reason they kind of get nervous of you, or they're nervous of something that's happened, in the environment. And so you might have to go back to using the back scratcher and kind of build that confidence back up and get them back to their old behavior. So it's not a big deal if they do regress, but, so it can happen. And, I'm also sometimes you'll have kind of more of a plateau happening where the cat kind of just, isn't making a ton more progress. And so if that's happening really early on, then that's a bit more of a problem because, you want to be pushing them, and so maybe that means you have to push them a little bit more, or maybe it means you have to try to figure out a bit better, like what they like and what they don't like, and reading their cues a little bit better, like we mentioned before. But if it's happening, at a point where they've gotten pretty comfortable with affection from the back scratcher, but it's taking you a really long time to get to the point where they like your hands, that's very normal for that to happen. It can take a long time to reach bigger milestones like that. So if plateaus are happening at that point, it's not as big of a deal. It's more of it's happening right at the beginning and they're really not making any progress at all. And sometimes that will mean that maybe there's something in your environment that's not quite right for the cat. Like I know that I've worked with cats in the past where they were really nervous being in an environment with other animals, even though they were in a separate space from the other animals. And so once they were moved into a foster home without any other animals, they really opened up a lot more. So once in a while, it'll be something about the environment in particular. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say about regression and all that. So I don't know, Beth, if you had anything else to add about regression before I go into this last slide.
You covered it. I think you covered it perfectly. I think that's really important to remember about their progress. So yes, thank you for that.
All right. So yeah, basically cats are really just individuals, and it can take them weeks and often months to become socialized. And I really see it as an ongoing process because even with my cat having her for a year and a half, she's still in the process of becoming more socialized. Like while she's at a point where she's very socialized with me, she's still very nervous of other people, and certain things make her nervous still. Even she still hisses at me sometimes, like when I'm bringing her food into her room because I'm kind of walking in and towering over her and she's standing on the floor. She sometimes hisses at me when I'm coming towards her with her food, even though she knows me. I do this every single day. So it can take them a while to get over all these different fears. So it's really an ongoing process. And often, if the cat then gets adopted or something, you're not even going to see their entire socialization happening with you because they're going to be continuing to progress in different ways in their forever homes. But they all do come around eventually, even if progress seems impossible at first. So I've worked with a bunch of different cats at EHS. I'm sorry, I'm gonna drink of water for a second. I've worked with a bunch of different cats at EHS that, they were super defensive at first, and they were the type of cats that were, oh my God, I got a frog in my throat. Sorry about that. They were the type of cats that would, be climbing the side of their cages to try to get away from people, and you couldn't even get their food close to them because they just swat your hand away. And you think like, is this cat ever going to become comfortable with people? They just seem so nervous. But I've seen it happen with so many different cats where if you give them time, if you're patient, if you're persistent, they all do come around and they all get to a point where they're more socialized and they're more comfortable with you for sure. So, don't be discouraged if progress is slow, because that's, the way that it is most of the time. So, they'd likely be making slow progress wherever they are. So don't blame it on yourself. Don't see it as, you're doing something wrong or it's your fault. That's really probably just, how they are because of their past experiences and their personality and just the fact that, this is all very new for them, right? So being inside and being around people is very new for them, if they're a cat that's lived outside their entire lives, especially. So it's really important as well to remember that people who are inexperienced can be just as successful at socializing shy cats as people who have a lot of experience. It's really just about being patient, persistent, and using the proper techniques, and using the tools at your disposal, like the back scratcher and toys and food, to kind of bribe them and build a bond with them. So, I've dealt with fosters in the past who, had no experience with any cats, socialized or not socialized. And they were, amazing with these shy cats because they just had the right personalities for it, and they were willing to be patient, and they were willing to communicate as well, so that if they needed some support, we were able to give that to them. So don't be afraid to take on these types of cats just because you maybe don't have a ton of experience with them, or you have no experience with them, because you can still be really successful. I had no experience at all with shy cats when I started at EHS, and I just kind of gravitated towards them because I felt for them and I wanted to help them learn to trust people. And so all the stuff that I've learned has just been through hands-on experience, and that's really the best way I find to build up your ability to work with these types of cats.
Do you find, Kaomi, that it is one of the most rewarding experiences?
Oh, definitely. I find, it's really lovely when any cat is, coming to you for affection and trusting you. But I find that it's, especially special when it's a shy cat, because you know how hard it is for them to trust you. And you know that, it took a lot of, effort on your part to get them to that level with you. So when you see them start to come around and make progress, it's just like even more special than it would be with any other cat.
Absolutely. And I feel that way too, having socialized cats throughout the last 4 or 5 years since I've been trapping, and, you come across cats that can't be put back out. So for me, I feel like it's the greatest feeling when you get that cat to love humans. And I feel as though some rescues sometimes can shy away from shy cats because they do take work, and it takes a lot of time and resources, right, to find those people who are going to socialize for you. We're so grateful that you're here and interested in this topic, because the more people we get doing this socializing, the more cats we can take off the street. Of course, we recognize that cats do need to be returned at times, especially if we're going to tackle this overpopulation problem. But if there's a situation for a cat that they cannot go back out, maybe they don't have a feeder, maybe it's just not a safe environment for the cat, like the transfer station I was telling you. I would have felt terrible having to release Rockefeller back there, because it was just, they were eating garbage, basically. So, picking and choosing which cats that you can work with is, doing what you can just to help those few is great. If you are at the point where you're just releasing the cats, but fixing them, that's going to make their lives so much better as well. And you're stopping that cycle. So I feel like us that do rescue work, there's a lot of guilt. we guilt ourselves. So really what we need to be doing is supporting each other and giving yourself a break and doing what you can. And that's all you can do is your best, right? I'm a teacher, and that's what I tell my students. And so we need to give ourselves that permission to just do what we can, right? And I hope that today that you learned and that you feel supported in your work. Often this is not this is a choice, but it is more of a calling than it is a choice. And I personally feel like I'm not going to stop this, because this is who I am. And I'm thinking that most of you feel this way if you're spending your Saturday morning learning this way. So I want to thank you, even if you're new or if you've been doing this for years, for the work that you're doing with cats. It's needed. We need more people like you. And we're so grateful that you came today. We're going to just take some time if anybody has any questions or anything that they wanted to mention. It's 11:30 on the dot. That's exciting. If you have to go, that's fine. If you need to go, if you have any extra questions, you do have our email, and we're here to help you in any way possible. So does anyone have any questions? I see some chats. Oh, you're welcome. So we'll hang out for a few minutes, maybe chat amongst ourselves, Deb and I and Kaomi. If you think of anything, feel free to turn on your mic and ask a question, okay?
If you stop sharing, we can see the faces, Beth.
Yes, good idea. Thank you. You are.
Lots of nice comments.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, I know better now, but when I was listening to Kayumi talk about what you shouldn't do, I was hearkening back to the first cat that I socialized, and I did maybe 6 out of the 10 things wrong. There was a bed in the room. I did have it in the room and a safe room, didn't have the window open or had reinforced it, but there was a big bed and she was under there for 3 weeks. It took me forever. And then one day it was awesome. She just came out and she's still my lovely cat that lives with me here.
Which one is that, Mama?
Savannah.
Savannah. Oh, yes.
I see one question there. It does take patience, but what if you have no success after very many months? What do you recommend? I mean, there was this one cat that we had at EHS who she was about 8 years old. She had, I think she had come from a colony in Hamilton actually. And it was like, she was originally, from Toronto, somehow ended up in Hamilton, and she'd been basically living in a colony for about 8 years of her life. So she was pretty set in her ways and not super comfortable with people. And I find sometimes with older cats, it's a little bit harder because they are more set in their ways. They're kind of more used to not being around people. And so when they are around people, it can be harder for them to start to relax a little bit more. So in her case, she was with this one foster for probably like 9 months and, was making very, very slow progress. And, she was just kind of okay with the back scratcher sometimes, okay with their hands sometimes, but some days they just couldn't get close to her at all. And it was really, she wasn't making a ton of progress. And, in that situation, we moved her to someone else who had a little bit more experience and who, we thought maybe a change in environment would maybe help her progress a little bit more. And it did a little bit, she was, faster to accept affection from this other person. And, they were able to, I think, dedicate a little bit more time every day to working with her. So she was able to come around a little bit faster with them. But, it was just a really long process, and she ended up getting adopted before she became very social. And unfortunately, I don't really know how she's doing right now, but it can take a very long time. Sometimes with her, we had her for probably about a year, and she didn't make a ton of progress from where she was at the beginning. And I'd say, once in a while that is going to be the case. And really the thing that you have to just do is, if you have the ability and the time and the resources to, is just to kind of keep working at it and to just, keep trying all the things that you can try and see if there are some different things that you haven't tried out that maybe would help, or see if, does it help if you dedicate more time, or does it help if, you bring someone else in, maybe, they'll relate more to somebody different, or whatever. Just trying a bunch of different things and seeing what works, and just really remembering that it can take a very long time. So it's not super shocking if it's taking months and months for them to really make a ton of progress, because it's going to be more the little things that you're seeing happening, like eating in front of you, falling asleep in front of you, slow blinking at you, all those sorts of things. And gradually you'll see bigger things happening, but it can take a long time for those bigger things happening, like them to tolerate or enjoy affection. It can take a very long time for that to happen, and it's not surprising if it doesn't. And something else too that people sometimes use is feel away. Like there's the diffusers and feel away spray, and that can be really helpful sometimes. Some cats don't seem to really, it doesn't seem to have much of an effect on them, but some cats it can really make a big difference. And they just relax immediately once it's on. So that's always something to try out as well, and see if maybe that would help at all.
Yeah, and also I can see a comment, has anyone tried CBD? I actually just got some CBD and I have tried, it hasn't been long enough to know if there's if it's having an effect on the cat, but I know it can't hurt. So that would definitely be something to try. I know it's hard because our resources and fosters are very, very precious and we need them. And to have a cat with someone for a year is a tough thing. So really, so in some situations, we've had to find a situation for the cat that they can live with care from a person, but at a distance. So like a barn placement. And barn placements we really only do for those cats that we really don't feel like you said, that one that took a really long time. You were lucky to find a person that would adopt a shy cat like that. And there are people like that. There really are. So just finding that person. But if you're looking at a barn placement, then there's some protocols to follow there too, like making sure the cat is confined 4 to 6 weeks, and there's a whole list. So if you're interested in learning about barn placements, we can talk about that after too. Just knowing though that displacing a cat, putting a cat in a new environment doesn't always work. Sometimes they will, even if they've been housed in that barn, like, in that safe room, in that crate for 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes they will leave and not come back because they don't recognize that as their home. So we're always wary about barn placing, placing barns and cats in barns, but there are other things. Maybe there's a working facility you can put the cat in, I'm just trying to think, like a warehouse or something. We can look for those options as well for those shy cats. Hopefully that was helpful. In your question, it's tough. It can be tough, and some are going to take longer than others for sure.
I'd love to have it. I'd love to have an inexpensive resource for the fellow aid diffusers, because I buy quite a few of them and they're really expensive.
Yeah.
I try to buy them in bulk, but
Yes, if we could find them at cost, yeah, that would be good.
Mhm.
I'm looking to see if there's any other. Okay.
You know what? I'm going to write to them. I'll write to them and ask them, tell them that, we communicate with people and we share that this might be helpful when you're socializing cats, and see if they're willing to give us some coupons or something. Who knows?
That'd be amazing. So I see someone said that they took notes. That's awesome. If you want, so we have recorded this. So if you would like us to, what I think I might do actually is just send the recording out to everyone that came and everyone that wanted to come but then couldn't come. And then you can share it out too, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be live, and people can reach out after if they want to connect with us after. So we'll do that. And also I'm happy to share the slides. So if you want the slides on hand, that's fine with us. Just send me an email and I'll forward them along, okay? Okay. Slides would be awesome. Okay, so maybe I'll just send the slides with the recording to everybody. Sounds good. Thank you so much, everybody. All right, I think that we can wrap up now. Some people have had to go, which is understandable. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Tammy.